Okay, let's unpack this. A proposed trade deal between the EU and the United States has certainly stirred the pot.
It really has.
And we've got some powerful insights today from Dutch economist Nout Welling, who, well, hasn't held back his
No,
views.
definitely not known for mincing words on this.
So today we're doing a deep dive into these EU-US trade discussions. Our mission really is to cut through the headlines,
Hmm.
understand what's truly at stake for the global economy, and try to pinpoint the underlying issues here, the implications of what's being proposed.
Especially through Welling's critical lens, which comes from that YouTube interview transcript we looked at.
Exactly. You might have caught snippets, maybe seen headlines, but the deeper implications. That's where Welling's analysis gets really interesting.
Yeah.
He initially, quite provocatively, labeled Donald Trump an economic terrorist, and he argues that recent U.S. measures against Europe have only strengthened that view for him.
Right.
So what's his core reasoning? Why such a strong statement?
Well, Welling's fundamental point is pretty stark.
Hmm.
He believes these U.S. actions, the trade measures against Europe, they just aren't based on sound economics. Not really.
Okay.
He argues they cherry-pick the data, so they focus only on the goods balance deficit.
Right, the stuff you can easily count.
Exactly. While completely ignoring Europe's services balance and, crucially, the fact that Europe actually has a slight overall current account surplus with the U.S.
So the whole picture looks different.
Precisely. From Welling's perspective, the economic argument just doesn't hold water. It doesn't add up.
Which suggests?
Well, it strongly suggests to him that Trump's approach is driven more by, non-economic factors, politics, maybe optics, but not pure economics.
And that makes things incredibly unpredictable, I suppose.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Which seems to be causing real friction within Europe itself.
Yeah, we're hearing about significant disunity, aren't we? France apparently leaning towards retaliation.
The Macron approach.
Yeah, while Germany's pushing for a quick deal. Understandable given their concerns about the auto industry, which is huge for them.
It is. And if we zoom out a bit, Welling connects this internal European division to broader geopolitical fears. It's not just about cars or tariffs.
Okay, like what?
There's an underlying anxiety, he suggests, that the U.S. might, for example, pull back support in other critical areas. Think about the war in Ukraine.
Ah, so a kind of unspoken linkage.
Potentially, yes. It raises the question, are these seemingly separate issues actually being sort of tied together in the negotiations, creating extra pressure points for Europe?
That's a fascinating and, frankly, quite a worrying layer to consider.
It is.
Let's really dig into the specifics of this proposed deal then, because some of them, well, they raise very big questions.
Definitely.
The first major point, this idea of Europe's supposedly investing 600 billion EUR in the United States. I mean, who exactly is making that promise?
Right.
And maybe more importantly, how on earth is that enforceable?
Well, Link is, let's say, highly skeptical about this point, which leads straight to that question. Who speaks for whom here? And who's actually going to implement it?
Yeah.
He thinks this figure isn't really a binding collective commitment from, the EU government or any single body.
So it's not like Brussels is writing a check.
Not at all. It's more likely an aggregation of plans, maybe pre-existing plans, from private companies across Europe.
Ah, okay. Adding up what businesses might do anyway.
Pretty much. And he points out this has been a weakness before. Think about agreements with China, where governments promise things the private sector would do.
But couldn't actually force them to.
Exactly. They couldn't enforce it. He even suggests that, given the circumstances, you might see a sort of natural aversion building up in Europe towards buying U.S. products anyway.
So is he suggesting this is just a paper promise then? Something to, smooth things over politically?
His view definitely leans that way. More about optics than substance. He consistently maintains that in these sorts of deals, the only things that are really hard, really enforceable, are the tariffs.
Right, the penalties.
Yes. Other commitments, like this investment figure or the energy purchases we should probably talk about next, they tend to be much softer, much harder to pin down and verify.
Okay, that brings us neatly to that second key point. Europe agreeing to buy 750 billion EUR in energy products from the U.S. over the next 3 years, so 250 billion a year?
Mm-hmm.
And the stated goal, of course, is reducing dependency on Russia, which makes sense on the surface.
It does, but Welling again poses some critical questions. First, is this genuinely additional buying?
Meaning, was Europe going to buy this much anyway?
Exactly. Or was this already in their plans to shift away from Russia? And second, could these energy products, LNG and so on, have been sourced from somewhere else, perhaps more cheaply, if this deal wasn't pushing them towards the U.S.
So are we potentially locking ourselves into a less competitive option?
That's the concern he raises. And again, he stresses that without clear enforceability mechanisms, these big numbers remain, well, somewhat aspirational. Soft commitments.
It sounds like Wellink isn't too impressed with the structure of this deal. He seems to favor a much tougher stance, aligning with what he calls the Macron school of thought.
Yes, he does. Advocating for, as he puts it, paying back in equal measure when faced with trade aggression.
It sounds quite confrontational, though. Doesn't that risk just escalating things? A trade war?
It's a definite risk, and that's the counter-argument. But Wellink finds a really powerful precedent, he believes, in how China reacted to Trump's earlier tariffs.
Ah, the U.S.-China trade dispute. What happened there?
Well, what stands out is that China didn't just match the U.S. tariffs. They responded with significantly higher counter-tariffs. We're talking, 125%, even 145% on certain goods.
Wow, that's punchy.
Very. And according to Wellink's analysis, this firm, unified response actually worked. It led the U.S. side to conclude, and he quotes this is not sustainable.
So the U.S. backed down?
Essentially, yes. China then set a non-negotiable condition for even starting talks. The U.S. had to withdraw all the tariff increases imposed after a specific date, April 2nd.
And did they?
They did. The U.S. complied. So Wellink uses this as a case study. It shows, in his view, the potential effectiveness of a really unified, firm response.
But that requires unity, right? Which we just said seems lacking in Europe right now.
Exactly. That's the crucial condition. He stresses that such a strategy absolutely demands unity within Europe and, ideally, among the rest of the world, too, to protect the whole post-World War II global trading system. He even floats the idea of a policy of double repayment for actions that undermine that system.
Double repayment. That's
Yeah.
strong stuff. This really does sound like much more than just a trade dispute over cars or energy.
Oh, absolutely.
It feels like you're describing a fundamental shift, a change in the entire global economic order.
That's precisely Wellink's point. He suggests this deal, or rather the U.S. actions driving it, signifies a regime change in global trade. It goes far beyond just tariffs.
A regime change. Okay, so what does that mean for the architecture of global commerce? What's changing?
Well, Wellink isn't just talking about new tariffs being slapped on things.
Yeah.
He's warning that we're seeing the dismantling of the very bedrock of global trade as we've known it for decades.
Which is?
The most favored nation clause, MFN.
Right, I've heard of that. What exactly did it do?
For decades, the MFN rule basically meant that if you agreed on a tariff rate with one country, say 5% on widgets from country X, that same 5% rate automatically applied to widgets from all your other trading partners who were part of the system, like the WTO.
Okay, so everyone gets the best deal offered to anyone. Creates a level playing field, sort of.
Exactly. It fostered transparency, predictability.
Yeah.
It was hard-won from the lessons of the disastrous protectionism between the world wars, foundational to the WTO, and Wellink's point is stark. Recent U.S. actions have effectively destroyed that system.
Destroyed it, yeah.
By moving to these bilateral deals and targeted tariffs that ignore MFN, it creates a fragmented system where different countries face different rules for the same products.
And the consequences of that?
Well, Wellink sees severe, far-reaching consequences. One massive issue he predicts is fraud. Rampant fraud.
How so?
Think about today's global supply chains. They're incredibly complex, right?
Ah.
A single product, say a smartphone, might have components made in country A, assembled in country B, using parts from country C.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if each of those countries has a different tariff deal with the importing country, how does customs realistically verify the precise origin and value contribution of every single component in thousands, millions of products?
Yeah, that sounds like an administrative nightmare.
It is. He argues it leads inevitably to practices like origin washing.
Origin washing, what's that?
That's where goods are deliberately rerouted through an intermediate country to disguise where they actually came from. So China might export goods to Vietnam.
Okay.
And then those same goods get shipped from Vietnam to the U.S., labeled as Vietnamese, to take advantage of a potentially better tariff rate or avoid specific restrictions on Chinese goods.
Wow. Just adding an extra stop to hide the source?
Essentially, yes. One extra stop in the chain, as he puts it. This creates an administrative mess, makes the whole tariff system practically unenforceable. He even draws parallels to the chaos and complexities seen with customs after Brexit.
That strategy, origin washing, it sounds incredibly difficult to police. Does Wellink offer any thoughts on how, trade bodies or customs agencies could even begin to tackle that? It seems like the system itself is breaking down.
Well, his analysis really suggests the system is fundamentally broken down in that respect. He implies that once origin becomes so easy to obscure, the traditional tools, the customs checks, they're severely hampered.
So it's just too easy to cheat.
It becomes a massive game of cat and mouse, almost impossible for customs to win without, I don't know, unprecedented levels of international cooperation, which seems unlikely right now, or maybe a forced return to much simpler, less globalized supply chains. He's pretty pessimistic about the current system's ability to cope, frankly.
That is a pretty bleak outlook. Yet, despite all this chaos and the breakdown you're describing, China seems to be navigating this new landscape quite effectively.
Yeah, surprisingly so, on the surface.
We're seeing these statistics that seem almost paradoxical. China's exports to the U.S. dropped significantly, right? Like 34.5% down.
A big hit.
But somehow, their total exports globally actually increased by 5.8% compared to the year before. How does that even work?
Well, Link explains this apparent miracle through two main strategies China's been using. First, what he calls trade stream redirection.
Okay.
Basically, after 2018-2019, seeing the U.S. become, well, an unreliable trading partner from their perspective, China started strategically diversifying, making a conscious effort to find and cultivate other markets.
So finding new customers.
Exactly. Actively pursuing new trade deals. He gives the example of recent free trade agreements they've signed with various African countries, for instance, spreading their bets.
Smart. And the second strategy.
The second one is exactly what we were just talking about.
Yeah.
Origin washing, or re-exporting.
Right. Shipping via third countries.
Precisely. Intentionally routing goods through places like Vietnam, Mexico, or others to mask the Chinese origin and get around U.S. tariffs. It's just, as he says, one extra stop in the chain, but it seems to be quite effective in maintaining overall export volumes, even if the direct U.S. route is partially blocked.
So they're adapting, finding workarounds. It's quite pragmatic.
Very much so. Shows a certain strategic adaptability.
And speaking of maybe perceived success or failure in negotiations, Wellick makes a pretty pointed observation about the UK's deal compared to the EU's.
Ah, yes, the UK comparison.
The idea that the UK reportedly got a better deal, that disparity seems quite striking if true.
Well, Link certainly thinks so. He actually uses the word embarrassing.
Embarrassing for whom?
For the EU. The fact that, in his view, the UK, England, as he might put it, managed to extract what he sees as a superior deal compared to what the EU, this massive economic bloc, the world's second or third largest economy, seems to have agreed to. For him, it highlights a perceived weakness, maybe a lack of cohesion or leverage in the EU's collective negotiating power in this specific instance.
That's quite a critique. So, bring this all together. What does this really mean for you, for our listeners, trying to navigate this increasingly complex global landscape?
Well, stepping back to see the bigger picture, this shift that Welling describes, moving away from a rules-based, transparent global trading system, the MFN world, towards one based more on bilateral deals, power dynamics, and maybe even geopolitical leverage. It has really profound implications. It's not just about the price of goods.
Goes deeper than that.
Much deeper. It impacts international cooperation, global governance structures like the WTO, potentially even national security calculations. The foundations are shifting.
So, perhaps a final thought for everyone listening. Consider how these shifts might ripple out, how they impact not just the flow of goods and capital, which we focus on, but maybe the very fabric of international relations. And ask yourself, can these complex interwoven issues, trade, geopolitics, security, can they ever truly be separated? What really stands out to you about this evolving trade landscape?